Get ready to be inspired by the great things happening in rural education. The Rural Scoop will bring you new ideas and innovative solutions. We'll dive into education issues and we'll highlight what's working in your rural communities. You'll hear from a variety of educators, administrators, professionals, and others who will provide relevant and engaging content in each episode. And now, serving up the scoop, here's your host, Dr. Melissa Sadorf.
Welcome back to the Rural Scoop. I'm your host, Dr. Melissa Sadorf, and I'm bringing you honest conversations and field-tested practices that lead to well-run rural schools. Today, I'm joined by Dr. Stephen Johnson, Superintendent of the Fort Ransom School District in North Dakota, and he's also a member of the NREA's Executive Board. He's a steady voice for small rural school systems, and he speaks up in state houses in his state, in D.C., and on the opinion pages. And he's talking about what policies really mean for rural kids, teachers, and communities. Steve's worn a lot of hats across 5 decades of education, previously leading Lisbon Public Schools. And these days, he also adds rancher to the list, which I know is a lot of fun for him, which means he knows something about long horizons, hard work, and planning for weather that you just can't control. So we're going to trace a through line in his advocacy. We'll pull some lessons from his recent testimonies and op-eds. And we'll talk about how rural leaders can really turn policy into practice without losing the soul of their schools. So let's get to it. Steve, thanks for joining me today.
Thanks, Melissa. It's a pleasure. It's nice being indoors today. We just got hit with one of those good old-fashioned North Dakota blizzards. I don't know if you could call it a blizzard, but we've had such a beautiful fall. And in fact, we did some herd work on Monday. It was 50 degrees. In fact, we had a little picnic out there with our vet who came and worked some cattle. And after we got done, we said, well, maybe tomorrow will be a little different. Well, tomorrow is a whole new day, and we 40-mile-an-hour winds and 6 inches of snow. So we're sure glad we got done what we did on Monday. So it's nice to be indoors today.
Well, we'll try to make the most of the time that you've got to be able to be inside and be warm. So, Steve, I want to start at the beginning of your rural advocacy work. You spend a lot of early mornings and late nights because of the work that you have on your ranch, where you're translating policies for small districts. And I want you to think about, maybe talk a little bit about a moment where you realized, if I don't speak up for these schools in these rural areas, maybe nobody else is going to.
Yeah, I think everything nowadays is it seems to me it's become more and more political, and everybody seems to think that either it's a Republican issue or it's a Democratic issue. And it seems to me that when you talk about a rural community, it is really a school district is a community issue. You know, when you're 70 miles away from like I like to tell people, when you're 70 miles away from the nearest Walmart, that is a community issue. It is about neighbors, and how do you keep this whole thing operating? And so you have to talk about how do we keep things going? How do we operate? How do we solve problems? How do we take conflicts? How do we solve those conflicts? We can't always sit around and wait for somebody else to take care of those things for us. And so you have to have some type of discourse. We can't blame it on other people all the time. We have to make those decisions on our own and work through those things as a group. And so I try to stay away from the whole thing about, well, it's a bureaucracy and that. It's our neighbors. So when I go down to Farm Service Agency, which is the USDA, and do things on the farm, for example, those are people that actually live in our community that I go to church with every day. So when I fill out my acre report in the spring, those are the people that, I work with. Although they're the federal government, I mean, those are the people I go to church with on Sunday. So they've got a thing that they need to do that they're working with. And we all try to become more efficient in how we work together. And so that's the approach that I like to deal with. And if we don't talk about it, that makes it very, very difficult for everybody involved. Can we improve? Most certainly we can improve. And so that's what we try to do every day. Most certainly in North Dakota, we've got that issue where our populations are shifting. Our populations, mainly because agriculture is technology-wise. Most of our guys can farm so much more than they used to be able to farm with machinery the way it is now. And it's become less manpower, so to speak. And so the machines are getting bigger. They're farming more acres. And so our populations are shifting more towards in our area in North Dakota to 7 or so counties. And so our populations out here are getting fewer and fewer. And so that brings us fewer kids. And so there's fewer schools.
Yeah. When you go to, well, I would assume that in Bismarck, you're going to get people that understand rurality. But when you are in DC or maybe other places around the country, when you're talking about rural reality, how do you introduce that to them and talk about it from your perspective?
Well, a lot of them have a real, we're flyover state. And so they really don't understand it. They kind of think that the family farm is, somebody has a few cows and a few chickens and they farm a few acres. And so I barely get a big kick out of a commercial that talks about somebody has, 800 acres or they got 40 acres or something like that. North Dakota, the average farmer's got over 1,200 acres. And I mean, that's small right now. And so farms are getting a lot bigger, and the technology that they have, compared to what my dad had, many years ago, the homesteader type of thing, those farms aren't out there anymore. The family farm now is usually a large generational farm. And they're probably 4 or 5 families that live off of that farm, and they're generating a lot of income off of it. And they are farming quite a bit. And so in our area, that's the way of life. And there's a lot of work. In this area, we also have a lot of government things. We are the county seat. And so with that county seat comes the USDA, and we have the Ransom County seat that comes with it, the Farm Service Credit. And then we have, along with that, North Dakota Veterans Home, which brings in quite a bit of service. We have a hospital here. We have clinics to go along with that. We have professionals with lawyers. So we do have a downtown. They struggle. They work real hard to keep things going every day. And then just 15 miles away, we have Doosan, which manufactures skid steer loaders. So manufacturing's a big thing, but now, hey, they're building a big plant down in Mexico. And so the talk on here, what would happen to our economy if all of a sudden they close the plant, which employs a lot of people. I think they have over 1,000 employees down 15 miles away from Lisbon. What happens if they move everybody down to Mexico and they no longer employ people here? And that would be just a disaster, not only for this area, but for the state of North Dakota. Yeah. And well, those are the kinds of things that we have people watch for. So, and then we have the school, and the school is probably one of the biggest employees in this community that I live in. So, the school is really important. So you can't separate, in my rural area where most of the schools are located, outside of those 7 populous counties. The school is the community and the community is the school. There is no separation between the two. They operate together. They're the cultural center. They are they are together. They work together.
Yeah. You're the superintendent of Fort Ransom right now. Can you talk a little bit about scale and geography and staffing and some of the day-to-day constraints that shape the decisions that you or your board are making?
Well, in Fort Ransom right now, we're what we call a non-operating school district. We finally have come to the decision that we ran out of students, we ran out of teachers. We were operating at the time that I retired from Lisbon in 2021. They asked me to hang on with them and help them out. We had about 25 kids, and that was K through 6. Well, at that time, 2 years later, we had a kindergarten licensed teacher that left. We couldn't find a licensed kindergarten teacher to replace her, and therefore, but we were fortunate because we didn't have any kindergarten kids coming in. And so we were able to operate without a kindergarten teacher, and we had that, but then we moved from 25 kids down to 14 kids. We had 2 teachers then, and then things really started to snowball on us. And we had another teacher that left us, and we couldn't find anybody to take her place. And so our school board made a conscious decision that that was it. We could no longer operate. And so we had been working with the previous school district that I had been at, which is Lisbon, for 58 years. We've been sending, Fort Ransom has been sending their 7th through 12th graders to Lisbon Public Schools, educate them. We went to them and said, hey, we just don't have any teachers. Can we send our K through 6th graders to Lisbon? And so that's what we're doing this year. So we're busing them. We have a bus that goes every day from Fort Ransom to Lisbon. I have a business manager and myself, and we are currently working through the state process of reorganizing. So we're going to become one. In my opinion, there was a lot of talk in North Dakota. We have 2 basic processes. One is called reorganization. The other one is called disillusionment. I didn't like disillusionment. That sounds more like an end, like done. I see this as more of a rebirth of a new chapter in the elementary. I mean, we've been working together for so long with Lisbon that this is just a new chapter in the Fort Ransom School. And so they'll be sending their children now there. So it's grandparents and whatever. So this is hopefully is going to be everything we'll go through. It's at the state process now. We've done all of our hearings. And so that was just going to be the next step.
And working with those families, they were on board with it. I'm sure that it took a lot of communication and effort.
Yeah. It's they finally the community. It was a community decision and a school board decision, and we went through all of that process. To me, it was like a big family that got together. It's kind of we had one big meeting that was in the church fellowship hall. And it was kind of a tough one, but what are you going to do? There was not much we could do about it. We were going to be down to 7 to 8 kids, if that. We weren't sure where they were going to send their kids because there is so many options in North Dakota. Although we do not have the voucher system in North Dakota. We've fended that off. We still have open enrollment. We still have virtual learning. We still have home education. There's a number of things. If without those options right now, there would have been 25 kids in the school. And so we take that combination of those options where people wanted to go and then the shortage of teachers, it just, it really hit us. And, I saw really the huge change, especially with people exercising options with COVID. COVID really changed a lot of what I saw in numbers when I look at state numbers, especially in home educated numbers.
Yep.
That in the state of North Dakota alone more than doubled because of COVID.
Wow, that's a lot.
But after COVID.
So, Steve, I want to shift the conversation just a little bit and talk about some of the writing that you've been doing. One of the things that you've done lately is talk about, and you've argued that dismantling the federal education structures that we have in place currently would create chaos, especially for rural kids. So if you had 2 minutes with a policymaker, how would you explain the practical consequences for those children and the school systems that they are attending?
Well, first of all, from a practical sense, my argument would go, so you have a program that is in this room over here and then in this building, and now you move it to another building. From a practical sense, just tell me how that smooth transition from one building to another is going to go. Anybody that has ever moved in their life knows that there is a move in your life is one of the most chaotic things that you can ever go through.
Yeah.
Some people will put that right in there with a death in the family. A change in job and a move is right up there with a death in the family. So you move an office from one place to another. I said that a lot of times. I've seen, I don't know how many administrations change in my nearly 50 years career as a superintendent. You saw the Secretary of Education change, but the people underneath usually didn't change.
Yes, true.
In my years as an administrator, I saw a lot of different principals, but I didn't see the secretaries or the administrative assistants change.
True.
Yeah, and so from just a practical, let's use some common sense. So all of a sudden now, there's nobody that says, oh, wait a second. You're supposed to, on February 15th, hand out a check for your small rural school achievement grants. Because nobody knows anymore that you're supposed to do it.
Yeah.
So number one, just moving people around, they're going to lose something. I understand that. You don't, from a practical standpoint, you just don't have a smooth transition. And if you're going to have a smooth transition, that's going to take a lot of organizational skills.
Yeah, definitely. What do we want to make sure is happening during this process, if this in fact does happen, to ensure that rural learners are protected?
Well, those are the groups that I'm most probably concerned about, is those that are on the lower end, the low income students, those students with English as their second language, those students that are special needs. I have a granddaughter that's deaf. some of those things with IDEA that are putting in, that are moving it from one place to another, those people there, I need to be protected. And we need to make sure that we are doing the right thing, you know? Yep. And I understand that some states are going to do things right, but some states may not. And so we have to be, on a federal level, we have to make sure that everybody is protected under the 14th Amendment. And so that's the case that I want to make sure. And I'm pretty passionate about that, because historically, the United States has not been very good about protecting our kids' civil rights. If you look back at our history, historically, we have not done a good job about that. I don't want to go back to the way it was when I was in high school. You know?
Yeah. You, in addition to writing, you've also done some testimony. And if you would, Steve, walk us through a recent bill that you weighed in on and the core message that you wanted lawmakers to hear. What was the data you used? What resonated? What didn't land? That kind of thing.
Well, the one that I think of right off the hand was the Small Rural School Achievement Grant. And we talk about getting rid of bureaucracy and the REAP program. And the understanding is that for small rural schools, REAP, which is Rural Education Achievement Program, was a program that was created for small rural schools in the United States to help them get through the bureaucracy of No Child Left Behind that came about in the early 2000s. That was the first thing that people really didn't understand, okay? Mm-hmm. Because, first of all, it allowed small schools to commingle their funds, whether it was Title I, Title II, Title III, Title IV. Those funds, they could commingle them. And those were schools that were designated that were 600 or fewer K through 12. That was based on enrollment by the National Council of Educational Statistics. Okay. And they had to be within an area and all of those other things. So that was number one, that I had to get people to understand that one. Because there was this disbelief that there was this bureaucracy inside the Department of Education that was just tying up all of these funds. And so that REAP alone was created so that state departments wouldn't take 10%, 20%. You know, a lot of federal grants, people don't understand that. A lot of federal grants are handed out to a lot of agencies, service agencies, or departments of public instruction, or state departments inside states. And what happens to them is that the state agency or the state service agency or whoever it is will take 10 or 15% of that grant off the top as administrative costs.
Right.
Under REAP, they eliminated that. It was the first federal program that they eliminated that administrative overhead. There was no overhead. So when Lisbon Public Schools got its small rural school achievement grant, that was direct money from the federal government to the Lisbon Public Schools that went right into our checking account. First one ever. There was no 2% overhead, no office in Bismarck, North Dakota, no administrative assistant someplace. It went from the federal government, from the allocation from the Congress into that pot, into our checking account, automatic.
Yep. Stanfield had it too.
And it was done. So when they talk about efficiency, I will argue I'm for efficiency 100%. There is a lot of better ways. And who came up with these ways? People like me, like Jerry White from Maine, who's on the NREA executive, talking to senators and representatives and people like that about how you can become more efficient. Right?
Yep.
And so I guess that was probably one of the ones that I talked about, how we can become more efficient. That's just an example. We cut some of that oversight. I remember one, a homeless grant, for example, we used to have in the state of North Dakota. By the time they got through with all the administrative, there wasn't enough money left over to do anything with it at all. So why bother?
Right. And that's part of that flexibility of being able to commingle funds, is you don't have any one grant that's big enough to do something very impactful. But if you can take a couple of grants and put them together, that's where you're able to get something moving.
That's right. And you coming from small schools like me, I don't have an assistant superintendent that was in charge of Title I or in charge of Title II or III, or, we were one person office, district office that took care of probably did the books too.
I did.
And I talked to these guys, some of them drive bus and coach. And so, we do it all. So we understand how it's working. I was at one school where I even was food service director. So I know how it operates and how it works. So I'm also a practitioner. I may have a PhD, but I'm also a practitioner. Like I told my nephew one day, I still know how that baler belt goes through the baler.
I have no idea what you just said, but I'll take your word for it. So one of the things that you've talked about, you've actually written about it, is small system stability, and you talk about the freeze to whiplash cycle. Can you talk a little bit about that and what the ways are that a tiny district, which we're talking about, and your many hats is something that you see a lot, but how a small district can absorb volatility really without cutting those core programs that mean they make differences for kids?
One of the issues that we have to have is that we have to have things that are here, and they have to be stable, so that if they continue to be stable, so we can keep the programs ahead of time. This last spring, for example, we did not know in Fort Ransom whether or not we were going to get our $23,000 of SRSA money, which is Small Rural School Achievement monies, until the end of May. Well, that's pretty hard to make some decisions. And then I'm looking at other schools, and we finally had to make a decision. I think we made our decision on May 14th. There about that when we did the final co-op with Lisbon to send our kids there. But that was about the time that we actually got our allocation. And it usually came out long before that. It was in February or March. Yep. So you had to make staffing decisions based on that. Most administrators that I know in little larger schools in Fort Ransom, they'll have enough cushion that they can wait a year or so. But I can tell you right now, I'm doing quite a bit of work with fellows from other states and in North Dakota about the effects of federal funding and how it could have on it. It looks like right now that next year and next spring could be some serious cuts in staffing and in professional development because of the decline and in cuts in federal funding. So it could be a real serious spring, and the uncertain federal funds. So with these delays, so those are going to be really tough things to watch.
Yeah.
And so if we can keep these programs together, and keeping people constant, if you can keep teachers, if you can keep administrators, if you look at test scores, if you have the same math teacher over time, your math scores will improve.
Mm-hmm. That's right.
As I looked over time, even though I may have had 5 different math teachers in a small group of, let's say, 7th and 8th graders, and I'm not saying that they were good teachers or bad teachers, but we just had too many of them. We were rotating out too many times. There was not the stability of teachers that were in those places. So retention becomes a huge issue.
Yep.
I also see that in my research dealing with administrative heads, school systems with superintendents and principals who stay in one spot, have staff that tend to be there longer. They have, so their retention on staff are there longer. They have communities that tend to have a better culture as far as how they see education.
Yep.
And they seem to have students that perform at a higher level. So succession and stability do play a very important role in how our students perform and how well they do.
Yeah. Which goes to the importance of the leadership pipeline, especially in rural communities. You've got to have, you talk about succession planning, you got to have an idea of when this leader leaves, who's going to take that position? And are they somebody that's already in the system or adjacent to the system, or at least has an understanding of rural?
Yes. And they've got to want to be there.
Absolutely. Because rural education is not for the faint of heart.
No. And I have no idea why I've stayed here as long as I have.
Yeah, 50 years says a lot about
yes.
Your tenacity and your willingness to.
I turned 70 in September, and I made a point when we have long winters here in North Dakota, and I decided, you know what, it's not going to kill me to go back now that I had a little time. I enjoy writing. So I started to write more. And then I got prodded a little bit and said, you know what, maybe you should send these to people instead of just writing. So I started sending things to people and publishing and getting some things out. So yeah, I started doing that. And some Some do, and I've had some failures, and some I've done just for fun. But I kind of enjoyed it. Writing a little bit more. I'm writing a piece right now about the last 2 years of Fort Ransom. When I have that, hopefully I'll complete that when Fort Ransom is no longer, when it becomes part of the Lisbon Public Schools, I'll have that one completed, but that'll be a little longer story to tell. But it's all about survival, I think. That was one thing that I really seen is survival. That's what we need to do.
So part of that survival is that as a rural leader, you really are the advocacy by default. You're the advocate for the district. You're the cheerleader for the district. And that is something that typically is on top of all of the other things that you're doing. So if you were talking with a new leader in a rural community and they were looking to be an advocate, but they knew that they needed to balance their local leadership with either the state or the national advocacy work that they wanted to do. What kinds of things should they delegate or personally own, or what kinds of pacing would you encourage them to consider when they were doing this kind of work to share their story with the broader community?
Well, I think first of all, they got to take care of their own first. I mean, first things first, you've got to take care of your own board and your own community first. And I've always, I came back to my hometown and my 20th class reunion at the same year. And you don't come back to that and walk down Main Street looking at the top of your boots. So you got to hold your head up high. And you gotta be honest with folks, and you've got to be looking in there, and you've got to tell them what you think, and you got to be honest. And if you make mistakes, you got to own up to it, and you got to correct them. And and you always have to focus. And I always believe that my focus has always been what's best for kids. Mm-hmm. And so whenever that decision that we had in a board, I always told my board what's best for our kids. Let's always put them as our first focus, what's best for kids. Second thing is when I ever had anything that we did within my board, as I said, whenever we talk about in this meeting, don't say anything that you wouldn't want your mother to hear.
True.
Sometimes we get so that we're pretty mean, and we have to be careful that we don't talk about things that we probably shouldn't be. And so, of course, when I first came to town, my mother was still alive and she wrote for the local newspaper. So I had to be very careful because I didn't want her writing things about what I shouldn't be writing about. So those are a couple of things that I would say are pretty important. Focus on kids. What's important about the kids? And so the first thing that I would say is you got to focus on what's important for you, first of all. Mm-hmm. And that's your community. Now, if you're putting yourself more important than your kids and your school district, then you've got some problems and maybe you should move on.
Yep. Well said.
Because then you're just using it, that's the number one problem of people that are coming into a small school district is a lot of people will say they're just using it for a stepping stone. And that person may be talented and say, well, they're going to be here for a year or two and they're going to be someplace else, not in the, not distant future. They're going to be gone. And so, that could be. I think they have to be realistic with that. I always believed that I never hired anybody that I thought couldn't get a job someplace else. Because when you hire somebody that can't get a job someplace else, you're stuck with them for a long, long time.
This is true.
Yeah. You have to be careful. So I have some really, I hate to say this, but when I first started teaching in a little town out in western North Dakota, it was the oil capital of North Dakota. And I was coaching at that time. I was a wrestling coach and football coach. I coached track. And one night, that summer I was going to get married and I needed to get a job. I was a farm boy coming from eastern North Dakota. And one of my wrestlers' dad was a driller on the oil rigs. And he said, well, what are you doing this summer? And I said, well, I'm getting married. I need a job. He said, have you ever roughnecked?
Oh.
I said, what is that? He said, I'm looking for somebody to help me out. So I said, okay, well, and he's a nice guy. Nick Berneski was his name. I said, well, I'll do that. Well, I roughnecked. So the first 5 summers that I was teaching school, I roughnecked to pay for my teaching habit. Dang. I ended up making more money during the summer than I did teaching school during the winter months. So,
yeah, you are not alone. There are teachers that I have had work for me that do the same thing. They work in the summer to support their teaching habits.
So, anyway, that's where I get a lot of my sayings. I learned a lot of things out there working for those people, and yeah, good people out there. A lot of good folks.
So, Steve, I always end with the same question, and that is, what does the term rural advantage mean to you?
Rural advantage to me is a simple way of life that you are not only a person, but you are a person that is known and loved and cared for. And when people out there in a rural community when things get tough, people are there to support you and to help you. And regardless of what you may think you have, they're always going to keep you in your place. If you think you're pretty tough right now, I can take you down to the elevator this afternoon and we'll get you in that, what we call the BS room. And they'll put you in your place in a hurry. When I was in graduate school the second time, my wife, I went down to the elevator and she said, where you been? I said, I just got about 5 graduate credits. And she said, where you been? I was at the elevator and I was in graduate school. I said, I got about 5 credits at the College of Knowledge. And they know it all there. So you got to be able to hold your own. So, but they're caring folks. So anyway, they keep track. You got to be able to hold your own.
Yep. Agreed. Thanks for that answer, because you are spot on. Well, I want to thank you not only for your decades of service and for the farm realism that you bring to policy work that you do, and really consistently putting kids and communities at the center of all of the things that you are focused on. But yeah, that clarity that you bring really does help us all be better at what we do at NREA. And I know in your state of North Dakota, it's the same way. So really appreciate you spending some time with me today.
Yes. Well, thank you, Melissa. I hope you have a really good Thanksgiving. I know that we're babysitting the 2 grandkids. I have one daughter and her husband is down in Mexico, and the other one took the whole family to Paris. So it's just my wife and I with 2 grandbabies here. So we're going to have a pretty quiet weekend.
Yeah, that's a throwback to when you first had kids.
That's right. And we're not having turkey either. We're going to have a prime rib on the grill. So if I can put in a plug, eat beef.
There you go. Spoken like a true North Dakotan.
That's right.
Well, friends, if this conversation gave you something useful, please make sure that you like the episode and subscribe to the Rural Scoop. Leave me a comment and share this episode with a colleague, because that helps other rural leaders find us. And I read every note that's sent. If you want to keep the conversation going, please connect with me on LinkedIn or other social media and tell me what you're trying out, what's working, and where you might need a thought partner. And remember, in rural leadership, our strength really is in our shared stories, because when we lead together, we really thrive together. I'm your host, Melissa Sadorf, and I will see you next time.
Thanks so much for tuning in to the Rural Scoop. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to rate, review, and subscribe. Your support helps us keep these important rural conversations going. And we'd love to hear from you, so feel free to leave a comment or share your thoughts. You can follow along and never miss a new release by subscribing on your favorite podcast platform or by following us on social. We're on YouTube at The Rural Scoop, Instagram at 𝐿sadorf1, and X at 𝐿sadorf03. The Rural Scoop is produced with support from 𝐓𝐫𝐫 Educational Consultants. To learn more, visit 𝐏𝐫𝐵consultants.com. See you next time for more great discussions about rural education. And as always, keep leaning in to the rural advantage.